Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez, and this is your weekly podcast for some things video game and pro wrestling related. I say some things because there is absolutely no way, with everything that is happening in both these worlds, that I can get to everything. So you have to pick and choose what to talk about because we don't need this to be a 2 hour podcast. So, I go around, I kind of look at things that are of interest to me, things that I want to nerd out about, being that this is the Nerd Federation podcast. So it can't be everything. It's got to be some things, and that's what we're going to do this week, is just kind of talk about some things. I mean, as you see in the title of the episode, it's going to be about Helldivers 2 to start, and then there are just a variety of topics to talk about this week. And I am going to do things a little bit differently this week as I experiment with the format of this podcast and see if that helps to bring more ears to the podcast. So later on in the show, I'm going to kind of make it a PR/media corner and kind of go over some of the things that were leading into the Xbox business update last week, the update itself, and kind of the aftermath, because I feel as though there's a lot of things that are going on in the Xbox community right now that are just kind of batshit insane in some way. So I want to talk about that from two different perspectives. And then at the end, this is something that I've been toying around with for a while, but there is just so much, craziness on social media. And as somebody who's on social media almost all the time, especially during the day hours, the working hours of 9 to 5, as we record this about a half an hour after closing time on a Tuesday afternoon. So it's a little after 5:30 on a Tuesday afternoon on the 20th. But I see so much, I don't even know what to call it, insanity, ill-informed opinion. So I had it in me to start this segment every week, maybe from now on, called the Brain Dead Comment of the Week. So I hope that resonates with some people, because I just think it's kind of comical to see what's out there. But yeah, I can't believe we're almost through with February. We're coming off of a 3-day weekend. On Sunday, I went to a dueling piano show with my girlfriend, and that was the first time that I've been to something like that. Like, I can't remember ever going to something like that, and we had zero expectations going into that thing. And we were pleasantly surprised by the format of the show. If you've never been, basically these two guys are at a piano and they're taking requests from the audience. And the whole idea is maybe to kind of pick songs that you would hear that would be good on a piano. People don't really do that, though. There's a lot of mix of different genres that get requested. Anything from rock to heavy metal to TV tunes to hip hop, which we were both surprised that these guys were able to do some hip hop songs. And they say they know 5,000 songs, and rarely, I think only maybe 3 times throughout the 3-hour show that they were not able to perform a song, which I thought was kind of amazing. Did I request a song? Yes, I did. And here's what I requested. And there's a reason why I requested it. I requested Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis. And the reason being is because if you're going to a show like that, where these guys are experts on a piano, you kind of want to hear a song that is meant to be played on the piano. And personally, I could not think of a better song to be played on the piano than Great Balls of Fire. And let me tell you something, they were all about it. The main guy, who was kind of the MC, the host, and he's also on the piano, it was the only time that this dude got up from his seat and got the crowd to like clap along. And then the other dude, who by the way has been on the Billy Joel Broadway show, which I didn't even know that was a thing. But this guy was just like amazing on the piano, and he was doing the singing as well. And then at some point, the MC dude came over to the other guy's piano, and they both started playing at the same time. And I kept telling my girlfriend, this is exactly the reason why I picked this song, because it's the perfect song for these guys to play on a piano. So I thought that part of it was cool, that they really got into it. And hey, it was my song that I picked. And if you're wondering why a 45-year-old man is picking that song, listen, my mom and dad, my dad, God rest his soul, listened to that type of music when I was growing up. Like, that was the stuff that they thought were oldies, and was always, it's a song that was routinely on the oldies station. So you pick up on these things as as you're growing up. So anyway, that was part of the weekend, but let me get into it here with Helldivers. And I want to, let me make sure I got my my timestamp here. So, man, unless you've been living in a hole the past couple of weeks, Helldivers 2 is one of the hottest things going on right now. And it's kind of funny how in the first couple of months of this year, we've had two games really blow up in different ways and on to different levels, with Power World, which I talked about a few weeks ago, and now Helldivers 2. I have not played Power World. I haven't downloaded it on my Xbox. I honestly don't know if I'm ever going to get to it. But Helldivers 2, man, this was something I was sort of interested in when it got announced, when the previews came out finally. I think we finally saw what the game was going to look like at some point last year. And I thought to myself, oh, this looks interesting. I don't know if I'm going to play it because it's 4-player co-op. And the game, trust me, as somebody who's only spent a couple of hours with it, this is a game that really does need to be played with other people, because playing it solo is fucking tough. It's a tough road if you're playing this game by yourself. So let's step back a little bit. The game came out February 8th, but it wasn't until the last week or so that the game is basically starting to blow up. And word of mouth is certainly helping it. I mean, I was kind of on the fence about playing it, but then when you see footage of it and you're thinking, oh, this game kind of scratches an itch for me. I've only played it for 2 hours, like I mentioned, and I can totally see why it's become so popular. Like I said, it's a 4-player co-op shooter. You can play it solo. It's between 1 and 4 players. The best way to play it is with at least 2. Probably 4 is the best. So basically, the best way to describe the game is just think about Starship Troopers, honestly. It's funny how since people have been playing this game, they've been either discovering Starship Troopers for the first time or rediscovering the movie, which, by the way, is based on a book that came out in the 50s. I did not know that. That is, and I've got that in my Amazon wish list now, because now I want to read the book. But think about Starship Troopers, that cheesiness. of it because that cheesiness is there. You're like fighting for democracy, fighting for limited democracy. They have you go to this training in the beginning that pulls out all this like propaganda about fighting for democracy. It's actually pretty hilarious. Like I find myself chuckling a lot during the training. So think about that. You're going around this fictional universe to save Super Earth, because that's what it's called, of course. It's called Super Earth. And you're going onto these different planets to basically fight these giant bugs, which is why everybody's getting this Starship Troopers vibe. And there's also robot enemies. So if you go when you're in your ship, you go onto this like galactic map, and it's divided into, on the right side is the bugs, and on the left side are the planets with the robots. I've only played one mission on the robot side. I like the bug stuff a little bit better. Anyway, like I said, the bug missions definitely have the Starship Trooper vibes to it. And again, the whole thing has Starship Trooper vibes to it. You land on these planets, and the missions are I think simple in some respects, because you're extracting and guiding scientists off the planet that are doing research, or you're gathering data logs, or you have to thin out the bug population or the robot population. You're destroying alien eggs. But along the way, there are also these secondary missions where you're securing a base, you're collecting samples, etc., etc. The fun of the game really is when you're completely overwhelmed by enemies, and it's basically a fight or flight moment, because you are doing everything you can to survive and make it to this extraction point, and then you have to wait for the ship to take you on your way. And let me tell you something, when you are playing this game by yourself and you are getting overwhelmed by either the bugs or the robots, you are fucking dying a lot. Like, it's crazy. I was last night that I was trying to get into a quick play match, and that wasn't working, because it is more fun to play with people in this game. Because you're able to complete the missions, pick up all this XP, and you pick up medals, and then you can use that stuff to go and get better guns and better suits and helmets and capes and all this other stuff, and get better stuff for your ship. So it's interesting from that perspective of, it can be played solo, but there's kind of a catch. People can easily join your game. So if I go onto a planet all by myself, somebody can drop into the game that way. There's also a setting where you can do friends only. And for me, that's like the default single player, because none of my friends are playing this game. None of my people that are on PlayStation, that are connected to me on PlayStation, are playing this game. So if I set it to that setting, I'm guaranteed to not have anybody come in. I haven't done that because, honestly, I think some of the matchmaking on the PlayStation side of things is kind of broken. And I'll get into that a little bit here. But going back to the game itself, one of the fun things about the game is that you can call in air support from your ship, which is sitting in low orbit in the atmosphere. You can call in weapons, resupplies, you can do an orbital strike, you can essentially respawn somebody who dies. You can call in this command, and one of the cool things about this game is you're basically putting in these inputs into the controller to call in the I forget exactly what they're called, the stratagems, where you're putting in like up. It's almost like you're putting in the Contra code for people who know that reference. It's the up, down, down. And the funny thing is that you're doing this sometimes as you're being chased by bugs, and sometimes you basically have to like outrun people. I should say outrun bugs to put in the input controls for these airship things that you're getting. So from the gameplay perspective, before I get into the problems right now that the game is facing, it's been fun. I have to say, playing that type of game, that type of shooting game on a PlayStation controller is still foreign to me because I'm used to playing those types of games on Xbox. Because that I feel as though I still will contend Xbox has the best controller. It's the offset sticks. It just feels better. The shooting on the Xbox controller just feels better. It just, again, it's a preference thing. It just feels foreign to do that type of stuff on a PlayStation controller. Anyway, so here are the issues now. It took me on Saturday night about 30 minutes to get actually into the game. Let me repeat that. It took me about 30 minutes to actually get into the game. And this is the issue with the live service game of this magnitude. So Arrowhead at some point decided to cap the servers at 450,000. So once there were 450,000 people playing across both PlayStation 5 and PC, you could not get into the game, which is crazy considering there were people who just paid $40 for this game and that were trying to probably enjoy their long weekend and get in and play this game. But because it's become so popular, there are issues gone in getting onto the game because of the servers, and Arrowhead, the developer, just does not have the proper server capacity at this time, which there's been a lot of discussion about that online, about what could be done in this situation. But for me, this is the problem that PlayStation's going to have to be on the lookout for, because we know that they're going to be going and releasing more of these live service type of games. And if this is any indication of what's to come, PlayStation is going to need to help these they're going to need to help these developers increase server capacity. And the CEO has said it's not that easy to do. Like, you have to buy server capacity because, you know, your stuff on the cloud and this, that, and the other thing, and it's not cheap stuff. So this is something that PlayStation's gonna have to help with going forward. Going back to the issues, one of the things that we saw over the weekend, and this was being reported on a variety of gaming websites, was that you're essentially fighting with other people to get into the game, and some of these people are fucking camping out on their ships for hours or days at a time just to hold their spots on the server. Which, when you think about, it's fucking insane. That's insane to think about, that people are just staying logged in to not lose their spot in the server. And on one hand, and here's the thing, it's the, you know, you're two minds of this thing. Like, one, I can understand that because you want to fucking play the game that you paid for. Like, I get that. So you keep the PlayStation on, you go about your merry way, and then you come back and you play, hope that you're still connected. On the other hand, it's kind of a dick selfish move because you're preventing other people from getting onto the servers and enjoying what's been I think a really good game, despite some less than stellar reviews, which I don't understand where that comes from. But anyway, Arrowhead has been made aware of this issue with the quote unquote camping, and who knows if they've actually started booting people off the server. I haven't tried getting on today, and I kind of want to get on a little bit later on and see what the situation is, because you figure people are going back to work. They're not going to be on the servers like they were this past weekend. Here's the other issue, though, that I'm running into. And I saw something today about it, and I said to myself, oh shit, this could be the reason why I'm having a hard time finding quick play matches. The majority of people playing this game are on PC. Let me repeat that. The majority of people playing this game are on PC. This is the first time in a while that PlayStation has released a game day and date on PC. I could be wrong about that. I'm going to have to check myself about that. But I think it's been a while. It's not something that happens often. So this stat came from Circana, that used to be MPD, and they have these various things that they track. They have some kind of player engagement tracker, and the tweet was made as of February 19th, so as of yesterday, that 1 in 4 players that were playing Helldivers 2 is on Steam, which is the popular PC client for those who are uninitiated, while only 1 in 20 players were playing on PS5. That's a huge fucking difference. But here's the thing. Clearly this sucks for people like me that are on PS5 and quite frankly don't have a lot of friends on there to play with. And even if I did have friends to play with, you gotta like coordinate times and things like that. So I do think it's fascinating in a way, like I said, how this game is clicking with PC players, which is why I think, and people are talking about it, that these games as a service games for PlayStation are now going to be day one on PC, because PC right now is carrying Helldivers success. Those numbers don't lie. So keep that in mind. I'm going to get into that day and date Sony stuff a little bit later on in the video game section. But yeah, again, it's been interesting to kind of see the success of this game and people talking about it and the word of mouth. And I'm seeing clips online about the funny ways people are dying and just the mayhem that's happening in these matches. But another interesting side note from the Helldivers 2 success is that a lot of people are talking again about Halo ODST, which is both great and frustrating. And here's why that's the case. For those that don't know, ODST stands for Orbital Drop Shock Trooper. Try saying that a few times in a row. For people who are familiar with the Halo franchise, obviously the main character is Master Chief. He's a Spartan. We know there are other Spartans in the game, especially when you look at Reach, the Fall of Reach, and then other Spartans enter the fray in Halo 4 and 5. We know Master Chief is not the only Spartan, but these ODSTs are kind of like your foot soldiers in a way. And they made Halo 3 ODST, which I think a lot of people loved because you had to be more strategic in the way you fought because you didn't have the armor like the Spartans. The thing is that these ODSTs, the Helldivers, look like they should be ODSTs. So that got some people asking about how come there was never a Halo ODST version, of how come there wasn't how come there wasn't a Helldivers version of Halo ODST? And apparently something like this was pitched because some former developers from 343, which is the studio that is involved with making the Halo games, one of them was on Twitter this past week and said that they pitched a lot of different ideas in the Halo universe and that this was one of them. And rightfully so, people lost their shit when they saw that. And they started lamenting of the fact that, wow, we could have had something like this on Xbox involving Halo characters. And for those who pay attention to this stuff like I do, you know that Halo's had all these problems over the years and that universe is begging for offshoot games from Master Chief and to things like a Helldivers clone. And to hear that a pitch like that, I think the guy said they pitched like 10 to 12 different ideas in that universe and they all got shot down. it kind of makes you think about what the fuck is going on over there sometimes at Xbox, really. I saw somebody today saying, well, I'm glad that that wasn't the case because you know, you don't want to have oversaturation of Halo in the marketplace, but I think having a little bit of oversaturation is a better result, a better thing than what we have now, where we might not get a new Halo game until 2028, which is fucking ridiculous. When you think about how the last one, Halo Infinite, came out in, what was it, 2020, 2021? Like, come on. That's like crazy. So, and I think that makes it even funnier in some ways is that there was this petition that picked up steam over the weekend for Arrowhead to do an Xbox version of the game. Now, I don't think that is going to happen, but it just goes to show you how people, when it comes to these games as a service, is that the more people that are playing this on different platforms, the better the pool is of players and the more opportunities you have to play the game. And hey, you know, it's not something that's going to happen soon because ports take a while, but if a year down the line, Sony decides, you know what, maybe we should bring this to Xbox. Can you imagine some of the crossovers you could have as far as like having ODSTs in Helldivers? I think that would be I think it's something that would be fun. So yeah, those are my Helldivers 2 thoughts. When I've been able to get in there and play, I'm having a fun time when there are other players to play with. Not so much by myself. I did see something. I can't remember if I mentioned this or not. I don't think I did, but I saw something on Twitter today how they put out up a patch for the game, and I think it helps with the matchmaking issues on PlayStation 5, the quick play option on PlayStation 5. So I'm going to give it a try later and kind of see, and I'll have to report back next week. But that's going to do it for this opening section. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I am going to come right back with the proper video game section. So stay tuned, and I'll be back right after this. And welcome back to episode 14 of the Nerd Federation podcast with your host, Will Hernandez. And yeah, I've been, in real time, I've been gone for like an hour and a half because I had to get my 10,000 steps in. So I was walking on the treadmill for an hour, and I've been watching Cobra Kai. I just started getting into that. I'm 7 episodes in the first season, and I love the fact that they're only half an hour episodes. So knock out 2 of those, got my 10,000 steps in, had my protein shake, and now I'm back, and I'm going to record the rest of this show because it's already 8:05, and I'm trying to squeeze in some kind of gaming tonight with the girlfriend away. So let's get into the video game section, and I talked about a little bit about it, in the beginning, and as I get my timestamp down. But this as you hear me writing, this industry, this video game industry, it's changing, and I'm gonna get into the Xbox business update a little bit later in the show from a journalism and PR perspective, but I think it's clear from the past week, now more than ever, that the video game industry is about to change in a big way. And people already don't like it. They don't like it because it's fanboy shit. It's just a lot of fanboy shit. And the problem is the old way of doing business doesn't work in 2024. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind right now is that video games are getting more expensive to make, and they're taking longer to make, which means there are large periods of time when companies are not making any revenue. Look at Rocksteady. Perfect example. It took them 8 fucking years to make Suicide Squad. Think about that. 8 years. That's basically 2 presidents' terms that it took them. 2 presidential terms to make excuse me, to release a new game. 8 years to make Suicide Squad. And the reaction to that game has been mixed at best. Shitty at worst. So here's what's happening. And that's just one studio, right? Think about the 8 years that you're paying for salaries and you're paying for production costs and there's nothing coming in. You're probably making sales on those Batman games, those Arkham games, but how much are you really bringing in? They're lucky that you have WB as your owner. But think about that. 8 years. 8 fucking years. I should say 8 year WB is as a partner for Rocksteady. So here's the problem. You've got the console holders, especially Microsoft and Sony. Nintendo's in a different league of their own. They really are. But you have these 2 platforms now are really hitting a wall because the console market has tapped out. And it's crazy to think that the console market since the PS2 days really hasn't grown over 200 million people total. So I'm saying here, the same people are buying these machines over and over and over again. Think about that. It's basically the same 200 million people that are buying the machines, the PS2s, the 360s, the PS4s, the Xbox Ones, even the Nintendos. And even I don't even think you can count those people because I guarantee you the people who bought a fucking Wii did not buy a Wii U or buy a Switch. So I don't even think Nintendo's really part of that conversation. And here's the problem, and it goes back to before saying that they're not making as much money in this hardware. So the money is in the software, the money is in the games. But as I mentioned before, the games are getting more expensive and they're taking longer to make. What did they say Spider-Man 2 was, the budget on that? It was almost double the cost of the first one. $350 million for a video game? So now, what's going to happen? And this is the stuff that people don't like to hear because of the console war bullshit. But more of these games are going to start to become available on other platforms. And that was the whole basis of the Xbox business update. They're going to experiment with 4 titles to start. And it's going to be more than that down the road. On the other side of the equation, you've got Sony. It's having its own issues. The margins in its game division is down. They're just, not that they're eking out a profit, but it's just, it's not the giant cushion that it was before. And now you have the interim PlayStation CEO. He said it this last week that it's very likely you're going to start seeing PlayStation games on other platforms. Now, that probably means PC. That probably means mobile. But who's to say that you're not going to start bringing some of these games to the Xbox? And it's a tantalizing thing because we just talked about it with Helldivers 2 and what that's doing on PC. How there were some points over the weekend, there were over 500,000 people playing. And a majority of those people were on PC. So, what do you think is going to happen? We already know that Concord and Fair Games, the other 2 games, the service games from Sony, from PlayStation, are also going to be on PC day and date. Why not put Helldivers 2 on Xbox? I mean, I know this stuff upsets people. You see it all over social media, and you see people losing their shit over it. But I think these people need to understand that this industry has changed a lot from even 5 years ago. Okay? And I hate to say it, but a lot of the pandemic really ruined a lot of things as far as the way business is run. And now you have some of these companies are in a bit of survival mode. And I know that sounds silly for billion-dollar corporations to be in survival mode, but if you want to continue enjoying this industry, you're going to have to accept some things that were unfathomable just 5 years ago. If you don't want to be paying $100 for games, you might have to just suck it up and see games from your console of choice going to the competitor, because that's kind of the road that we're on right now. So I think in some ways you kind of have to embrace that. I know people don't like to hear that, but I don't think we're going to have a choice at the end of the day. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what I've been playing, because I think a lot of it is kind of getting to be old hat. But let's talk about Final Fantasy 16 some more, because I am now, I think, 15 to 18 hours into the game. I'm through the first major part of it. So like, I guess the first third of the game, or maybe the first quarter of the game, is now done, as I am bringing up the PlayStation app right now. So 16 hours into the game. I think I said maybe you're talking 40 hours I'm going to spend. So I'm not even at the halfway mark yet. But listen, I'm still enjoying it. I'm still having a great time playing the game. I think the combat might be starting to get a little repetitive for my take, but the thing is that now, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but there's a certain thing that happens in this game that unlocks some more of the Eikon, Eikon abilities. So now there are 3 of them. And it's kind of cool to see how they mix and match like these major combat abilities that you have now. So now I'm in a part now of the game where you're in a completely different area of the world. At least that's what it seems like. I haven't gotten to see the map yet, because I haven't gotten that far into this area, but it seems like you're just in a different area of the world. And it's kind of funny how, I don't know if this is a spoiler, maybe not, but maybe if you want to skip ahead a minute or two, but the game skips you in the timeline like 5 years ahead, which is super interesting, I think. And I was kind of like sitting there, I was like, oh shit, this is kind of interesting. Not to say that other games don't do that, because they do. I just was not expecting to be shot forward 5 years into the story. So it just like makes you wonder, well, what the fuck happened in the last 5 years? It does make me wonder too if that's what the DLC is about. With the DLC, they just came out with the expansion not too long ago. So that part of it's cool. I'm still enjoying the story. I like the fact that when you were going to proceed into this mission, this one mission in the game, they kind of made it seem like it was an end game. Like, okay, you're about to do a major part of the story here. You can't go back, meaning you can't go back to finish these side missions in this part of the world. I didn't know at the time that shit, they were going to fast forward me 5 years in the story. So that was kind of cool. But man, that mission that I did before, it got into the next, I guess, act of the game. I'm not kidding you when I say that thing almost took me 2 hours to complete. I could not fucking believe it. I'm sitting there like, what the? I can't believe this like quote unquote level is still going. And the thing, the shit that was like kind of crazy was the boss battle here was what a fucking, again, I cannot get over the fact that you're basically playing a movie with this game. The set pieces in this game are just, they're tremendous. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. They are fucking tremendous. I feel like I'm playing a movie. I think sometimes they go on for a little bit too long, but they are these epic fights that are cinematic in some ways, because I still don't like the fact that you cannot like finish off an enemy on your own. You have like these real-time button prompts that you have to do to finish off some of this stuff. But listen, I get it. This really is a game of epic proportions, and they really put a lot of fucking money into the production value in this game, which I am going to say, I think it's safe to say that this is the best production value I've ever seen in any video game I've ever played. Like, seriously, but the stuff that goes into this stuff, the fights, the grandness of it all, the epicness of it all is just really, it's really far-reaching. I need to look up, I'm gonna have to come back talking about games being so expensive, how much Square Enix, how much this game cost them to make. And I'd be curious to know whether they actually made their money back on this game, because it's just epic. It's an epic game of epic proportions. And I just think it's funny that with this being my first Final Fantasy game, this is basically what I've been treated to. So, I'm going to try to play it tonight before I go to bed, at least maybe squeeze in an hour and a half into it, because I don't know if I'm going to get this game done in the next 9 days. Probably not. So, my game a month thing is not really happening. Prince of Persia, that's taking a complete backseat right now. I am going to have to start that game over again. And I'm not that upset about that, because I know it's a 20 to 25 hour game, and I know I'll get that done, I think, pretty quickly. I just think because of the type of game it is, I think that's like a game you have to play almost every day, because you're going to forget how to do certain things. And I've forgotten how to do everything in that game. So I'm going to have to finish Final Fantasy 16 and then go back and just start Prince of Persia from the beginning and just kind of plow through that game and like get that done. And, if I can have 4 games finished by mid-March, that's a vast improvement over what I did last year. And I think I mentioned this on the show before about what I did. I'm trying to find the pad. It's around here somewhere. This room is kind of a mess right now. But, I think maybe I finished 6 games. I played more. I must have played, I think, about a dozen, 12 to 14 games last year. But finished, I think maybe only 6, which I desperately need to change this year. And listen, when you're doing a podcast like this, you better be fucking playing games so that you're taken as somebody credible. And it's funny because I was mentioning to my girlfriend about just trying to keep up with the Joneses, for lack of a better term, and she's like, "Yeah, you gotta be playing, you got to be watching wrestling." I'm like, "All right, you said it." Don't forget that you said that. But no, it's you find balance. You find balance in being with somebody and doing things with them, and then kind of taking a chill pill and doing your own things, because you can't always be together doing things together. And it's great that she is very supportive of me doing the podcast and some of the things that come with that. And one of the things that comes along with that, and also helps us to spend time together, is that we both like to read. And right now I am reading a book. It's called Masters of Doom, and it's exactly what you think. It's about id. It's about the creation of It Studios with Carmack and the two Johns, Carmack and Romero. And I am one of those people that firmly believes that if you are going to sit in front of a microphone like I am right now, or have, I don't even know people do blogs now these days, have some kind of content creation around, I should say, some kind of content around a certain topic like I do with video games and with pro wrestling. I think you need to kind of seep yourself in the art, so to speak. I think you need to read as much as you can. I think you need to listen to as much as you can, play as much as you can, watch as much as you can, and because you need to absorb things. And I am really getting a kick out of reading this book for several reasons. If you consider yourself a gamer of any sort and somebody who has played any of these games, do yourself a favor, go buy this book and read this book. It's a few years old now. It's several years old, but it doesn't matter because of the time period it's talking about, which is the 80s and the 90s, and just the explosion of video games in general, but more specifically PC gaming. And part of the reason why I'm enjoying it so much is because I really missed out on that era. I really did. I was an Atari kid. I got Nintendo late. Even though I was playing video games on my Commodore 64 and then later on a compact Presario, remember those things? I was not playing really those type of games on there. It was really interesting because I was such a console person, though I was playing different types of games on the Commodore 64. You play Oregon Trail. You play, I remember playing Pac-Man and the original Super Mario and Sporting News Baseball and Dig Dug. You were basically playing a lot of games that you found in the arcade, or some of these text-based games that they had, like Zork and shit like that, which I dabbled in, and I found boring, by the way, back then. So growing up, I never knew anybody that played PC games like that, or was exposed to anybody that played PC games like that. By the time Doom really got up and running, we're talking about early to mid 90s. I was just on the precipice of going to high school. And in junior high school, again, I didn't know people who played those type of games. So I missed that whole era. I really did. And it's something that I wish I can go back and relive. But you're reading this book and it's funny how some things never change, talking about the hype about games and companies announcing games too early that are nowhere close to being revealed. I should say released. And I'm in the chapters now. I've got about 100 pages to go. I'm in the part of the book now that's talking about Quake and how it's been a year. Think about how quickly games were developed back then. That's another thing that's really kind of crazy. And they were working on cutting edge technology. Don't forget, these guys created their own engine. It's the id engine. Like that was their creation. So not only were they creating the engine, but as soon as the engine was done, they would go ahead and create the game. And this was happening like within months, which is fucking crazy to think about. But I'm getting now to the point where they had this idea for Quake, and then a year later, the game is not out because these guys are dilly-dallying, and it's interesting seeing the dynamics between Carmack and Romero, and things are slowly starting to break down. And I highly recommend reading it because, again, you get to learn about the kind of inside baseball about game development and engines, which I really still don't quite understand. I know they're basically souped up computer programs, but it's really people talk about how creating video games is like magic, and it really is. Like the shit that they have to do. I mean, think about this for a second, where these guys wanted to make games that they couldn't quite make yet because the technology was not there for it to happen, because computers were not advanced enough for them to create what they want to create. That's fucking crazy. They had to wait for the technology to catch up in a lot of ways before they can go ahead and make the games that they eventually made, which were groundbreaking games. I mean, people still talk about them to this day, and there are still iterations of those games today. Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Quake. We're probably going to get new. They just remastered some of the old Quake games. We're probably going to get new ones relatively soon. So it's really interesting. I highly recommend you going to read that. It's kind of gotten the itch now of learning more about the industry from that perspective, because again, I do think that it really does help guide me in this journey that I am on with this podcast. So, all right, I am going to take a quick break. Then I'm going to come back and talk about some pro wrestling. And oh boy, there's a huge weekend coming up, by the way, for pro wrestling. I mean, huge. And I will talk about that right after this. All right, and welcome back to the Nerd Federation podcast with your host, Will Hernandez. And let's get into talking about some wrestling, because it is going to be quite the weekend coming up this weekend. And it's crazy. You've got 4 different shows this weekend, because you've got WWE, right? You got Elimination Chamber in Australia, which is happening at 5:00 in the morning on Friday. It's funny because about that same time, New Japan is also going to be putting on a show. They've got back-to-back shows in Japan with New Beginning. They've got that on Friday and Saturday, and there were some major matches on both those shows. Some major title matches on both those shows. Matt Riddle's fucking wrestling on that show, on one of those shows. Nick Namath is making his New Japan in-ring debut against David Finlay for the, what the hell are they calling it now? I don't even know. What is the title called now? I've got the card up here. That is now called the Global Heavyweight Championship match. Jesus Christ. New Japan has too many damn belts. They really do. So there's a lot going on this weekend. And don't ask me how I'm going to watch all this, because I don't know how I am going to watch all this. So let's just kind of go through what we're going to see this weekend. And it starts early in the morning on Friday, because if you got New Japan with the one match, with the one card, the New Beginning in Sapporo, I'd say the major, just looking at this card, and I was looking at the cards before, the major matches on here, this is Okada's last, this is it. He's going to be in a 6-man, a 12-man tag. So this is it. This is his last match proper in New Japan. So it's crazy. If you watched his match against Tanahashi a couple of weeks ago, this was on the same card as the Bryan Danielson and Sabre Jr. It was interesting because those guys have obviously wrestled a bunch of times, and it kind of came off as their greatest hits in a way. They squeezed all that in I don't know what it was, maybe 15 minutes, if that. And listen, I've got a lot of respect for Tanahashi. I really do, but I think I think his time is coming to an end because he has really slowed down. It was really obvious to me when I saw him wrestle MJF at Forbidden Door in Toronto. And I know MJF after that match, in the days after that match, came out and defended Tanahashi. And I get it. You're gonna defend your brothers in the industry, but as Jim Ross loves to say, Father Time doesn't do any jobs. And that's just really kind of the bottom line with Tanahashi. But I think it's safe to say that he's getting towards the end of his career. I don't know. I could be wrong. He didn't look so bad against Okada in that match, but this guy's gonna be wrestling Matt Riddle this weekend, which is fucking crazy to think about in some ways. So the major matches on Friday, the Friday show, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 title matches. So you've got the IWGP Women's Championship match, right? Honestly, I'm not even going to attempt to know what I'm talking about here because I really don't. Honestly, I will be completely honest with you. Then you've got the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship match between El Desperado and Show. I'll be curious to see how Show comes off in this match. I don't know. I've seen Yo and Show. It's funny to say that, wrestle as singles guys because they used to be in a tag team, and I don't know. I don't know if one guy is more accomplished than the other at this point as singles wrestlers, but this will be an interesting kind of match to kind of see how this plays out. Never open weight. Again, it's Shota Umino versus Evil. It's Evil's first offense. I don't know. I saw something the other day about, New Japan now has to be in this position where they have to make new stars, and I wonder if Shota wins this match. That'll be interesting because it's Evil's first offense here. So, yeah. And then you got the 15-minute match, the time limit for the World TV Championship. That's between Tanahashi and Matt Riddle. Then you've got the main event is Nick Nemeth, which is so interesting to see that here against David Finlay. The next night is not as stacked of a card, but the main event of this card is the IWGP World Heavyweight title with Naito going up against Sonata. So it's basically a rematch of the Wrestle Kingdom. So, it's a pretty good bet that that Naito's going to win this match. There is a hair versus hair match with Tsuji versus Umanura. And you wonder, I don't, listen, I have a feeling maybe in the Umino match that Jungle Boy shows up, that Jack Perry shows up. We'll see. By the way, he is scheduled to wrestle in Chicago, the Windy City show. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but man, I am so tempted to go to that show. But so yeah, good stacked matches this weekend for New Japan. Friday night, you've got TNA, and man, there's some interesting shit happening in TNA right now because of the whole thing with Anthem firing Scott D'Amore. And it kind of seems like behind the scenes that the wrestlers there are kind of rebelling. And this is going to be the first live event that they're having without D'Amore at the head of the table. So I don't know, this might be the show that I prioritize this weekend. You're going to have Moose and Alex Shelley in the main event. It's a no surrender rules match. So basically, the other side, Moose's team or Alex Shelley's team, they basically have to throw in the towel. And then the other guy wins the match. I don't think Shelley's going to regain the title in this, but I don't know. I'm not too crazy about the rules here, but we'll see what happens. Knockouts World Title, you got Jordan Grace against Giselle X, who won the X match, Ultimate X match. Mustafa Ali going up against Chris Sabin for the X Division title. That should be interesting. You've got the tag team title. It's the best of 3 series finals between ABC and Grizzled Young Vets. And I watched match 2 because I did watch Impact this past week, and that was a pretty good match. Josh Alexander versus Simon Gotch, which is interesting, I think. It's interesting that Alexander's contract just got picked up. His option just got picked up. So Anthem realizes the people that they have to keep, despite the more not being there. You've got PCO versus Khan, who used to be in WWE as part of the, oh God, their names are not coming to me right now. Oh boy, that's going to bother me. But then you also got the Knockouts tag titles between Decay and MK Ultra. And now I'm looking up who, Connor, yes. He was in, oh God. What the hell was was the faction called in WW, in NXT? Why can't I remember what their names were? Wow. Why can't I remember? The Ascension. Holy shit. That's crazy. You know what's funny? That he was in WWE Developmental on two separate occasions. That's kind of crazy. I did not know that. Anyway, so that's the TNA. And then you've got WWE with Elimination Chamber. You obviously got the 2 Elimination Chamber matches, which I don't know, man. Listen, I will, and this is not a knock against WWE, but just the fact of having the same types of matches on on one show. I just don't understand why they don't do this separately. Have a Royal Rumble. Why not have 2 Royal Rumble matches on back-to-back days? I don't understand why you can't do that. Why do we have to have 2 of the same match on the same show? It kills variety. I mean, how many different ways can you do these matches? That's kind of the issue that I have with having 2 of the same match on the same show. It just, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense with that same stipulation match. But you know what? That place is sold out. They don't give a shit. So I think it's a pretty sure bet at this point that Drew McIntyre is winning that men's match. Tough to tell who's going to win that women's match. It's probably either going to be Becky Lynch or Bianca Belair, one of the two. I'm going to say Becky because I have a feeling that Bianca's going to be wrestling Jade Cargill at WrestleMania. I think people really want to see that match, myself included. You got the Women's World Championship with Rhea Ripley versus Nia Jax. Then you've got the Undisputed Tag Team Champion match between Judgment Day, Damian Priest and Balor versus Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate. And I have a feeling that match is probably going to steal the show. I want to watch that match because I love Pete Dunne and I love Tyler Bate. And those guys are really, really underrated wrestlers as far as I am concerned. Then they're doing some fucking Grayson Waller effect with Cody Rhodes and Seth are going to be there. Can you imagine taking that flight to Australia to just do a segment on a pay-per-view like that? That's gotta be a little frustrating. But yeah, listen, there is a shit ton of wrestling this weekend, and we're not even counting the Revolution card, which is also just stacked at this point. You look at the main events, likely going to be Sting and Darby Allin versus the Young Bucks for the tag team titles. You got the world title match between Samoa Joe, Swerve, and Hangman. Women's title match with Toni Storm versus Deonna Purrazzo. You've got the international championship match with Orange Cassidy and Roderick versus Roderick Strong. Continental crown, Eddie Kingston versus Danielson. And then Takeshita is going to be wrestling Will Ospreay. I have to believe that you are going to see the TNT title as well defended on this show. So that puts you at 8 matches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would put you at 7 matches. I hope that they keep it at just like 7. No more than 8. You got to stack card. Tony doesn't. I know he's got to fill up a 4-hour show, but just have like longer matches, man. Just please do that. So that's really like, it for the pro wrestling section. It was, and maybe I'll go a little bit further and talk about, actually, there are 2 things I do want to kind of mention. That the fact that I did watch Impact this past week, and they have a really neat feature on their YouTube where you pay to be an insider. It's $1, it's 99 cents a month. It's really like pocket change. And you can watch that week's episode of Impact. I think it's actually available. You can start watching it like a half an hour after it starts on Access. So, I had to walk on a treadmill to get my minutes in. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna pay for this. I'm gonna watch TNA. And when I watch TNA, I do enjoy what I see for the most part. They get a little bit too sports entertaining for my liking sometimes, but they have a lot of wrestlers on that roster that I like to watch. So I'll be interested to see, again, like as I mentioned before, how things play out with this whole situation with Scott D'Amore. So you think that some of these people will walk? I don't know how that works. Do they not suit up for no surrender and protest, or do they not show up for tapings the next day? Because usually you got the pay-per-view on Friday, they usually start taping the next batch of episodes either that Saturday or Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's going to be, I'll be curious to see. I'm curious to see what happens there. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was Orange Cassidy. And if you saw the news from over the weekend, Orange Cassidy, Darby Allin, and Tony Khan were in the UK. They were watching Tony Khan's soccer team that he owns. And then they made their way over to the Rev Pro show that was happening. That was Will Ospreay's last match for that organization. I mean, he's been involved with that organization for as long as I've known about Will Ospreay. I mean, that is like his hometown organization. That's where he basically made a name for himself. So, as part of the show, there was this 6-man scramble match that suddenly had a 7th participant, and it was Orange Cassidy. Which is cool. You know what? They were over there. I mean, this was probably planned. Let's not, this is probably like a planned thing that Orange was going to participate in this match. And one of the things that was supposed to be a staple of this international title, and it was when Pac had it as the Atlantic champion, was taking the belt and defending it in different organizations across the world. And that was something that Pac did, if you remember. He was going to different federations, promotions, and defending that title on their shows. So it's funny, the Viritol that's happening right now between AEW and WWE fans is just kind of at this all-time high, and it's I don't know how many times I can say it on this podcast, but it's fucking ridiculous. The back and forth between the fanboys of both organizations. And there was a lot of like unwarranted, I think, bullshit coming from the WWE side about, oh, why is Orange Cassidy doing this? Why is he wrestling against these nobodies? Why is he putting himself in a situation where he could get hurt? And I'm thinking, you guys are not concerned about that. Like, this is all troll bullshit, fake outrage. A lot of these fanboys love to do this. They love to do this fake outrage shit. And listen, these AEW fanboys are just as guilty as of it. So don't get me wrong. Again, it happens on both sides. Look, I think it's cool that AEW is in a position where it lets its wrestlers wrestle outside of their main organization. Why is it okay when TNA does it? But it's not okay when AEW does it. And this is the fucking the double standard here with, like, for some reason these WWE fanboys want to see AEW fail when that should not be the case. And vice versa. Fans should not want to see WWE fail. Because listen, WWE, for better or worse, and I've said this before, they're the top dogs. And if the top organization is doing well, that should theoretically spill down to the other organizations in the industry. I said that when the Netflix deal was done. And I also said I worried about the repercussions from this whole Vince stuff on the rest of these organizations. So far, so good, right? I think you're seeing so far so good from that aspect. So I don't understand why these WWE fanboys just have this venom towards AEW. It's fucking crazy. It's almost like this thing where there can't be another organization that's getting as much airtime or taking as much air out of the room as AEW is. I don't understand. You want to have a healthy industry. Competition is good because that helps to drive up salaries for these people that really only, when you think about it, have a very short health shelf life, I should say, when it comes to earning big money. I mean, come on. You want there to be as many options as possible for these folks. I'm just never going to understand this shitting on that happens between these fanboys. It just has to stop. So good on AEW for making that happen. Good on Orange Cassidy for agreeing to that, because he doesn't have to do that. I mean, if it's something that, they probably asked him to do, and he was like, yeah, sure, why not? That's the whole point of this belt. So, anyway, we got to stop with this fucking madness. The madness that's just happening with these fanboys. And I'm going to go into that in this PR and marketing section, and I will talk about that right after this. All right, let's get back into the podcast now. This is episode 14 of the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez. If you wonder why I do that every single time I start a new portion of the podcast, you got to remember that some people just kind of, click around, and there are timestamps, and I think it goes back to just listening to sports radio back in the day, and that's kind of how they came back from a commercial. So I want to keep that, keep that vibe going here. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to call this segment going forward. I don't even know if this is something I'm going to do every week, but I'm going to combine the last two segments here as I finish out the show here. And I had mentioned the Xbox business update earlier in the episode, and I'm not going to go into too deep into details about the Xbox business update that happened last week. I think some of that will naturally come out in this portion of the podcast, but I wanted to touch upon why the business update, was needed. That's staying in there. I'm not going to edit that out. Why it was needed in the first place. And I've said before on this podcast, and this goes for pro wrestling as well, but the media surrounding the video game industry, both from a journalist perspective and an influencer perspective, it's weird. It's weird. I don't know how else to really put it. And a lot of it is access journalism. And what I mean by that is that a lot of these media outlets and influencers rely on access to games early, to executives, etc., in order to cover the news, write about cover the news, write reviews, whatever, get their engagement in. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Honestly, it's not much different than what happened when I was a sports writer. I mentioned this before. It's how I started my media career. I was a sports writer professionally for about 4 years. I did it in college as well, but I kind of don't count that. Did that for 4 years, and during that time, I had access to locker rooms during the appropriate times before and after a game. When I covered minor league baseball, I would stand behind the cage in batting practice and just watch people take batting practice, and you talk to the coaches and you shoot the shit with the players. But it was never really a friendly thing. It was more of, we had jobs we had to do. When I covered the WNBA for a year, I could have went to shoot-arounds in the morning on game days. I never did, but that access was available to me. And I think the difference here between the two is that some of these journalists, and really, it's really these influencers, take that access to another level because they think some of these executives are their friends just because they met them at a fan fest or played Destiny online with them, or Halo or Diablo. It's fucking weird. And the reason why it's weird is because you develop these parasocial relationships that are really in the mind of one person. And when it's time to criticize or look at the industry with a focused eye, you let those feelings get in the way. And I think it's really come to a head in the past couple of weeks and has really affected this industry in a bad way. So on the journalist side of this whole thing, you had a lot of them reporting the last several weeks that Xbox was thinking about taking some of its games to PlayStation and Nintendo. Now, don't forget what I said earlier in the podcast about the way this industry, the video game industry, is changing. Keep in mind also that franchises like Minecraft, which Microsoft owns, is all over the place. It's on Nintendo, it's on Switch. Even the Minecraft spin-off game that came out last year was on PlayStation and Switch day one. So you had that type of stuff happening already. But as I mentioned earlier, we've arrived at this point where Microsoft and Xbox feel that they need to get more bang for their buck with their titles and bring them onto more platforms, which isn't necessarily, I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. And here is where some of the problems start coming into play here. Was the problem with the rumors that came from legit journalists. And say what you want, there has been a lot of bad juju out there now with people who leak rumors or talk about rumors, and now people are questioning the validity of a lot of this stuff. And you should. Here's part of the issue though. These influencers that are out there, they took things to the extreme. And when I say the extreme, it seemed like people were starting to make shit up for engagement. I mean, you had people on fucking podcasts passing, I don't know, it seemed like imaginary. No, I mean, no, we can't see what happens behind the scenes of some of these podcasts, but they're sending notes to each other and saying, oh, that's going to be a big deal. Okay? And the reaction to this stuff was fucking out of control. Because you had these so-called Xbox influencers saying that they were going to walk away from the platform. You had people saying that they were going to get out of covering Xbox on their YouTube channels. They were selling their machines. You had people nearly crying on podcasts and videos. Grown fucking men acting like children. I get being passionate about something. I really do. I'm very passionate about pro wrestling. I'm very passionate about video games. I'm very passionate about the New York Mets. But if you saw the way some of these people were reacting on social media, you would think a family member died. That's how bad it was. And I'm not gonna go and like name names. Really, not yet. And I'm gonna get to that because I am gonna call out some people for some bullshit. I'm not gonna name names. But if you do a Google search for Xbox influencer, most of the names that come up on that list are the people that I'm talking about. Guys that are older than me. This guy in his fucking 50s that's acting like a child on social media. I had to mute him because I just could not believe like what I was reading. But this is what happens when you think you're forming these relationships with these people, and then they do something that you don't like. Guess what? These corporations don't give a fuck about you. They don't care. They don't fucking care, because at the end of the day, they answer to their shareholders. That's just the way capitalism works, baby. I love capitalism. It's ugly at times, but it's the way it works. So, what happens now? We finally got the news from the horse's mouth last week. And guess what? It wasn't so bad. It wasn't. People thought that Microsoft was getting out of making Xboxes. That this was it. This was going to be it. Let's not fucking take into account that they just spent $76 billion fucking dollars buying Activision Blizzard King. People thought that day one, day and date on Game Pass was going to stop. That's not happening. People thought Starfield and Indiana Jones were going to go to PlayStation. That's not happening yet. TBD on that. So what happens? It ended up being 4 games. And the rumored games are Sea of Thieves, Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, and, oh God, I'm forgetting the 4th game right now. Oh no, that's not good. I forget. Grounded. See, there you go. I knew what that 4th game was. Again, but that's based on rumor and innuendo. Here's the problem. The overarching issue is that a lot of these people treat rumors like fact when they're just rumors. Sure, this stuff could eventually become fact. They say that most of these rumors are based in some kind of facts. I get that. But at that moment when we're reading and listening and hearing these rumors, unless it's coming from the official source, it's rumor and innuendo, and there's really no reason to get yourself worked up into a tizzy about it. And the thing is, I made a point to call out some of these folks on social media for contributing to the bullshit. And this is where I'm going to go, like, I don't care. Because I'm not involved in the industry the way these people are. But the three biggest offenders that I see, and you can find all these people on Twitter, Idle Sloth, okay? This guy's constantly retweeting every fucking rumor Xbox that Xbox is involved in. Listening to podcasts as they happen so that he can tweet out almost rumors as fact. Because him and I listen to one of the same podcasts, so I know. It's ridiculous. Then you got this guy fucking Garrett Atkins and his Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo sites / accounts. Then you've got Colbrill. I have no problem calling these people out because they're parasites that are ruining the video games industry with their bullshit. Especially someone like Garrett Atkins. You know why? Because this guy continuously claims to be part of a news organization, but is constantly passing along rumors as news, and then he'll cry about being better, but then doesn't change his tactics because he's a slave to engagement and his Twitter engagement. Got to get those numbers up so you fucking Elon can pay you. Come on, man. Be better. Do better. That's the thing that frustrates me, and it's the same thing with the wrestling stuff. It's the same concept. Look, if I'm Xbox going forward from a corporate level, I'm not talking to these influencers anymore. You got to close the door now because you really do have to do what's best for business. And I think what's best for business is not talking to these folks. You got to just cut them off. And I'm not really necessarily talking about maybe the journalists. I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you cut off the Tom Warrens of the world and the Jess Cordons of the world. I don't know if you take it to that extreme. But all these influencers and these people that you fucking take out to brunch or have brunch with, I've seen the pictures, man. I know who you are. Like, come on, man. That would be me going to have a sit down dinner with Rebecca Lobo. If you don't know who Rebecca Lobo is, look that up. WNBA legend, UConn legend, who I covered in my career when I covered the WNBA. I think the Xbox needs to cut off these folks and be like PlayStation and be like Nintendo, where they keep their mouths shut and then focus on making great games. Look, I get it. I get that Xbox felt like they had to do what they had to do in this past 5, 6, 7 years because they were losing. They lost. They've already lost this generation as far as consoles are concerned. But now Xbox needs to patch these leaks and just focus on making great games. Stop talking to the media. Stop talking to influencers. Take the PlayStation and Nintendo route and just kick ass. That's what needs to happen going forward. And I really hope that they learned the lesson last week with this whole thing, in the past few weeks with this whole thing, because it blew up in their face. And you watch the podcast, you watch this business update, and for all intents and purposes, it could have been in a fucking email. That was the joke that was going around last week. So, I hope that kind of gave you some insight into maybe the journalism and PR perspective, because I think both things are at play here, and I want to make sure that I talk about some of these things because I do think it's important for me to have a perspective on it, because it kind of helps me with my job in a lot of ways as far as dealing with journalists and dealing with my clients and the PR portion of things. So if any of y'all listening to this out there, I mean, you're getting the real Will right now. It's interesting, isn't it? So, brain dead comments of the week. And the reason why I am just going to roll into this right now is because it is loosely associated with what I just talked about. And generally speaking, well, let me back up. I'm not going to call out who said this specifically, but it is from one of the people that I just mentioned. So, they tweeted this after the business update, and I am just going to read it. It's not necessarily a brain dead comment, but it's more of an example of the bullshit that these influencers put out. And I think it is just like damaging the industry, particularly Xbox, going forward. So here's the Zeet, the tweet, whatever the fuck you want to call it. This is from February 15th. The, in parentheses, great podcast today happened because of feedback. Feedback matters to Xbox. I understand anyone who feels better about the Xbox brand today than yesterday. However, I also understand anyone who still has valid concerns. It's interesting looking at the replies. Somebody was like, concerns about what? Strong brand with strong vision. Even gave a teaser of future hardware. And having more games like Minecraft that are multi-platform is a huge plus for Xbox. And here's the brain dead comment, the response. Xbox died for me. Exclusives leaving, so am I. They never said that. They never said that exclusives were leaving. And these are people that are like paying for the check mark. You know? Meantime, this particular account was all doom and gloom and leading the fucking charge about leaving the platform. This person who had built this personality on Twitter because of Xbox. And when I saw that stuff going around, there were people who had cooler heads, you know, like actual fucking adults, saying that they were basically laughing at all these people that were like this account, saying that they were going to leave Xbox. And I remember one of my responses to one of these people was let's see how long that lasts. And guess what? It lasted all but 5 minutes after this podcast went out. Because you know what? This account has been tweeting Xbox shit like crazy. So they were full of shit. And that is where I am going to end this week's show. Wow. You know, I was a little bit more writing down things that I want to say this week for certain things, like with the industry changing and Helldivers and this PR journalist corner, because there were some points that I really, really wanted to make this week. So I hope in some ways you found my rants entertaining for episode number 14. As a reminder, I am on all the socials, and I just need to do a better job of promoting myself on the social medias. And I need to do a better job of clipping myself and getting that out there. There's something I'm going to be using going forward for that, and hopefully I'm going to test it out starting tomorrow to make a couple of clips to make them longer, because I think they need to be longer just to drive the engagement. So because these minute clips that I do on Buzzsprout are not helping me at all with the engagement. So hopefully you'll see more of that. And yeah, listen, thanks again for joining me this week. I hope again that you found it entertaining. Spread the word, and I will see y'all next week. Peace out.